Hello and welcome to Press Party, where we turn the tables on the media. I'm your host, Katie Eastman. The State of Our State and the State of Our Union speeches were one after another Tuesday night, making it easy to compare the president and the governor. In an unprecedented decision by the California Supreme Court, Stephen Glass was denied his ability to practice law because of his ethical decisions as a journalist. And a major network interrupts a congresswoman for no other than Justin Bieber. We'll get to those topics soon, but first, let's meet our panel. As always, we have Dr. Bob Rosenthal. He is the Chair of Communication and Journalism here at Suffolk University. We have Erica Mora. She is a multimedia journalist at the Boston Herald. And Tito Jackson joins us. He is a Boston City Councilor. First, the state of the state, then the state of the union. Let's take a look at the highlights from each.
My fellow Americans.
And fellow citizens of Massachusetts.
It's not often the State of the Commonwealth and the State of the Union fall on the same night. But after the snowstorm last week, Governor Patrick had to reschedule his last address to fall about an hour before the president's. Patrick's speech had a lot of looking back on his years as governor and just a little bit of the issues facing his administration in the recent months.
That serving as your governor would be the great honor of my professional life. But I didn't expect it to be so enlightening, so humbling, and so much fun.
There was a lot of hype leading up to President Obama's speech, and while he covered a large range of topics, his one-liner about paycheck equality grabbed the media's attention.
It's time to do away with workplace policies that belong in a Mad Men episode.
But many media naysayers didn't think much of his speech.
I thought it was a pretty underwhelming speech, actually. And the reality is you could almost write the articles before they come out or what people are going to say.
There's always next year. For Press Party, I'm Katie Eastman.
So we always know Fox News hated his speech, NBC News liked his speech. I mean, we can predict those. I think Kristen Powers did have a point. You can almost write what the media is going to say before you have those speeches. But is there a way to cover it unbiased? Can you say it's good? Can you say it's bad without having a lean to the left or the right?
So I think when we look at the imagery of what just happened, I think it's powerful and it's historic. You have a black president as well as a black governor. The great part for me is that, if you're in Massachusetts, you might get a little bit confused about what's going on here. And I think there's a great deal of imagery. So I think, first off, that piece is actually really, really powerful. But I think when it comes down to it's kind of like the movie Head of State. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
I haven't seen that.
You have to see that, Katie.
Okay, sounds good.
But it is actually Chris Rock running for president. But when it comes down to it, we know that the right is going to feel a certain way, and we know that the left is going to feel a certain way. But the real underlying piece is we are a better country. We're better off than we were 4 years ago as a state. We're better off 4 years ago than we were as a country. And I think we definitely need to tell the truth relative to what's going on out there.
You mentioned the imagery. That was a really fascinating thing to see the governor speak, and then an hour and a half later, the president speak, and we were able to look at them so closely up against each other. What was that like?
Well, it was fantastic, and of course in Massachusetts we weren't confused because here healthcare is a settled issue. It's not controversial at all.
It's still controversial. I wouldn't say it's totally. You still have people saying.
Well, hold on, not to 97% of the people who have health care.
Yeah, but I think it does show, as Tito said, that we as a nation have come a long way when two chief executives, one of the original colonies, and a president of the United States, are both men of color. I think that is just absolutely amazing. The next glass ceiling will be if a woman can get elected president or governor in this state, for that matter. But so it is somewhat historic, and yeah, it's predictable. To the journalism about it, I think particularly at the national stage, I would sort of like at this point in time to say, here's the speech, broadcast the speech, and at the end, do away with the chattering class and the talking heads and just kind of say, that was the speech, wasn't it?
But you have to say something. You can't just pretend it didn't happen.
Well,
you have to talk about it, say the highlights.
Right, report it in his event. So report the highlights of it, report the fact that of the wonderful 2-minute ovation that that our wounded soldier received, the sergeant who
That
received
was a
there.
really beautiful moment. I don't think anyone
Exactly.
disagreed. Fox
Exactly.
News, NBC, CBS, they all agreed
Exactly,
on that.
but then stop the analysis at that point in time. We saw it. Why do you have to tell us what we already saw?
But what are we supposed to do then as journalists? Aren't we supposed to give and report and maybe analyze? Maybe not journalists, but the people that are the editorialists, the people like Bill O'Reilly.
Yeah, and that's
isn't
it.
that
That's it. They're editorialists
They are
as opposed to
editorialists.
journalists. I think it would be better off if both of you were doing an analysis than someone even like me or Tito doing the analysis, right?
Right.
Because you know what you're
Hey,
going to get on
don't-
Fox and
don't
you know
mess
what you're
with
going to get
my
on MSNBC. We're part of the chattering
Okay.
class.
That's
They're the
true. And
journalists.
you do have, so Bob Schieffer, he came out and said that was a wonderful speech. Should he be someone that should say that? I mean, he is known for a journalist, but he does have a very strong opinion on certain things. So who are we to say who can say their opinion and who can't?
Yeah, and you're right. But on the other hand, as a journalist, you're supposed to have at least some sort of somewhat objective perspective of something in terms of a reporting style. And I understand the analysis. I guess I'm just tired of the same old, same old. You know, Chris Matthews has a man crush on Barack Obama, and anybody on Fox thinks that Barack Obama, is the next thing closest to Lucifer on the face of the earth.
Right.
So
it is the same
it
old, same
is
old.
what it is.
But at the same time, you could also say the State of the Union speeches can be the same old, same old. I mean, it's not often that we hear something where, like, former President Bush said the axis of evil, or Gerald Ford said the State of the Union is not good, and I think we want that as journalists. Like,
I have a question.
This is something
I have a question
interesting.
for both of you as women. The Republican response was the congressman, the fourth-ranking congressperson in Congress, woman,
yeah.
and she was there primarily because she was a woman. The speech was vague, and it was supposed to be vague. That's what
And it
you know,
seems, I think it
generic.
was a
What did you
smart
think?
idea for them. She seemed like a mom to me.
Yeah.
Watching that, I was
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
you
yeah.
are a mom.
I was comfortable. I listened. I retained because she did seem like a mom or an aunt or somebody that I
So
would
it did
listen
work.
to.
then.
I mean,
For me, it did.
I think it could work if you believed in what she was saying and you did not like watching President Obama. I think it could work. I don't know. I thought it was a little condescending.
Okay, so I was wondering,
Yeah.
because it's clearly there, she was there to
Yeah.
try to pull women into the Republican Party, and I was just wondering, you said you identified with her.
I identified with her. I not necessarily agreed, but it definitely grasped my attention. And the fact that she was like my mom. I mean, I don't always agree with my mom. Sometimes my mom can
And it
be
was a smart
condescending,
move. I
but-
think it got the media talking about it because it wasn't just another white guy talking up there, which is what it usually is.
Right.
So.
At times though, it does seem like it's pandering. And interestingly, we know that the Republican Party needs to make gains in specific demographics. They might need to at some point actually speak to people of color, which is a group that oftentimes can lean socially conservative, but just totally get ignored. But I also think though, you see people like Alan Keyes at times who get rolled out. That it can seem as if folks are actually pandering to specific groups.
Well, but all politics panders. I mean, Bobby Jindal did one a couple of years ago, if you remember one of the responses, in an attempt to say, hey, we're a party that also is inclusive, et cetera. So.
That's very true. Well, thank you guys so much for weighing in. Make sure to stay tuned for our next segment. Tell us what you think about the speeches on our press party comment section. Stay right here on BostonHerald.com for the next segment, Shattered Glass Dreams. Thanks for joining us here at Studio 73. I'm your host, Katie Eastman. 15 years ago, we got to know the name Stephen Glass. He was a journalist who wrote incredible stories on computer hackers for magazines like The New Republic and Rolling Stones. Problem is, they were all made up. Today, because of his ethical transgressions as a journalist, the California Supreme Court finds him unfit to be a lawyer.
Were you a pathological liar?
I think I'm someone who lied all the time in order to try to get people around me to think better of me.
Stephen Glass is perhaps the most infamous journalist, known for faking more than 40 stories on computer hacking for The New Republic and other notable magazines in the late 90s. He was just 25 years old.
You had your brother pose as George Sims.
His story came to life in a movie he wrote called Shattered Glass.
I feel really attacked. and you're my editor. You're supposed to support me.
15 years later, and he can't shake those ethical transgressions, the 41-year-old has been trying to be a lawyer for years. But on Monday, the California Supreme Court made their final decision.
Does one have to be a pillar of the community in order to be redeemed?
No, he needs to show the exemplary conduct. That means giving back to the community he harmed.
They denied his admission to the state bar. In the decision, the court said Glass failed to show genuine remorse and never fully came clean on all his fabrications.
What's a truer sense, a truer indication of rehabilitation is when the person is doing it for altruistic purposes and not because they're trying to gain admission to the bar.
Glass is a paralegal now and has not spoken publicly about the decision. For Press Party, I'm Katie Eastman.
So whenever the court is debating the morality of a human being, it gets pretty sticky. This is especially interesting for us because this is a journalist, so it shows how the decisions you make as a journalist can affect your future life and your future career. Erica, you told me you don't necessarily agree with this decision.
I don't. I mean, I understand their reasonings, I comprehend it, but it happened 15 years ago. I think it's far worse if he were to try to go back into journalism. He's doing a career shift. How long does he have
to redeem himself?
To redeem himself. I mean, right? Like how long does it take? What is the forgiving period?
So
you know?
that was the whole decision of the court. They said it doesn't matter what happened in his past. It's about how he redeemed himself. And they said just by being an honest citizen like you or I isn't enough. He had to do charitable work. He had to prove without proving he was doing it for himself, which I don't know how you prove that. I think even people who do charitable work can do it for themselves.
No, but I think, first off, we need to realize that lawyers have a higher ethical standard because it's literally written, right? And it can be,
right.
It's based on passing a bar. I think one, he crossed Oprah. With that the court of Oprah is out. That when you mess up with Oprah, that's an issue for me. But again, I definitely do think we should have seen him kind of step his game up to do something that would if you look at someone like Michael Vick, he was actually required to do things in the animal space after he did that. Now, mind you, that was a requirement of the court, but you would think that this individual would want to redeem himself in some way relative to that.
Well, the interesting thing is his actions weren't necessarily illegal.
Right.
And so the court is saying that it's an ethical line, and that is tough.
Yes, and his actions were unethical, but there's also an ethical standard for admission to the bar that needs to be upheld. And in fact, the fact that he's a paralegal to me is a little bit here's a person, remember what he did. He fabricated about 40 stories here.
AKA
and then,
lie.
by the way, wrote a movie about himself,
Right.
and so
profiting
from this.
fabrications.
Right, exactly. So now some law firm has actually hired him to do research.
I'm sure he is
one of the
a brilliant
partners.
man. Nobody
Absolutely.
doubts that.
But
He excelled at Georgetown Law School.
How can you trust his research? If he were my student at Georgetown Law School, I would have made sure that I vetted all of his papers to make sure that what he was doing was legitimate. Because why? Because when you lose, he lost his credibility on a public level and did not atone for that in any way. He didn't do his series of mea culpas. He has, and then he comes up with the film. So the Supreme Court.
That is kind of a mea culpa. He profited from it.
Right, he profited from it. So it's not really. It's not like wearing sackcloth and going up the cathedral steps on your knees. He needed to do something like that in the modern day. He needed to take his medicine.
And America loves that. The story of redemption when you say you're sorry. But you in that sorry, you have to admit everything. And I understand from an emergency communication perspective, not only do you admit what you did, you're supposed to admit when you cheated in 3rd grade and 5th grade and all of the other things that you did, put it all out there and then continue to build back. He chose not to do that, and on top of it, he did something that literally profited him.
Which was earlier, so I guess technically it could have been from after the time he profited to now.
And he could have chosen another career that didn't have a bar like ethical standard relative to him.
He has been obsessed with becoming a lawyer since he stopped being a journalist. So you have
He's been
to
trying for years, right?
Yes, years and years. Right after he was fired from the New Republic, he went to law school, excelled in law school. Obviously, it is perfect career for him had he not done all these ethical wrongdoing. So
right, and in fact, one of his brightness worked against him there because he was a brilliant writer, et cetera, and he thought he could get away with it.
And he was a
could
brilliant
hide
liar.
it.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And so what has happened is he has not come off that high horse, and I think that's what the court found.
And whether or not it's a high horse or a disease, I don't know. I mean, clearly, I have to think that he's sick in the head from doing
Huge
these
ego,
things.
maybe.
Yeah.
Or he did it on purpose, you know. And to me, I think he used a monetary gain and built a career out of this, which, you know, to me, there's a little capitalistic, you know, component to that. Again, he's bright. But the thing as a lawyer, though, is that if you don't have that ethical standard, there's so many things in so many areas that they could actually get into that.
It's funny that we're talking about, because I mean, the reputation of lawyers isn't amazing. I mean,
No,
neither is
it's
the
not.
reputation of journalists.
Right.
But so it's like, I'm sure there are a lot of really bad lawyers out there who don't have great ethical standards, but because they didn't lie
because it
on a
wasn't
national
public,
scale.
right? It wasn't
Right.
made public on a national scale, and again, it's sort of, and honestly, I haven't followed him since he did what he did, and since I saw Shattered Glass, I haven't really researched into what he's been doing much, you know. But
he hasn't been. The other component is this: he hasn't been out there. They said he hasn't.
Maybe if he
hasn't made statements about this.
Man,
so he had no problem being on Oprah. Again, I'm upset about that, but he had no problem going forward on that stuff. So your redemption has to come with the medium and in the format that you actually had to fake.
Right.
And he chose not to do that.
yeah,
Right.
I just feel like at some point you have to forgive and forget. At some point.
But does the bar have to forgive?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
that's
I would
the key.
actually say that,
That's
and
the
understand, in the state of Massachusetts, it used to be that you had 15 years, a 15-year record for a felony. It's now down to 10 years. But folks who committed a felony at that time actually had to have that scarlet letter on their record for 15 years and not be able to be a lawyer and oftentimes get a job.
Right.
Just curious, have we disbarred any of our former speakers of the House that were convicted?
That is a good question.
Because I believe most were lawyers.
I believe that has actually happened.
Well, we will look this up for the future press party. Thank you guys all for weighing in. Thank you for watching. Keep the debate going by making a comment on our press party chat and stay on BostonHerald.com. The news networks get Bieber fever. That's a click away. Welcome back to Press Party here at Suffolk University's Studio 73. We've seen Justin Bieber's face plastered across the airwaves, but one network made a decision to cut to that coverage at a pretty bad time. Erica Mora has more.
That new report by the independent bipartisan agency concluded that the NSA's records collection program, not the storage, but the records collection itself, is illegal.
Just as we think Andrea Mitchell of MSNBC is finding some resolution on the whole NSA scandal, she interrupts a congresswoman for...
We've got some breaking news out of Miami. Stand by, if you will. Right now in Miami, Justin Bieber has been arrested on a number of charges. The judge is reading the charges.
Wait, what? Bieber's arraignment is more important than a conversation about the legality of the NSA collecting data?
So the total bond would be $2,500.
How did he get his hair that way? I mean, does he have a hairstylist there? Sorry, folks. I got distracted.
It's absolutely beautiful. My whole world revolves around him.
MSNBC got hit with criticism. In an interview with CNN, Mitchell said it was the luck of the draw, arguing that she delivers more news in her newscast than most. So does that make it okay interrupting a congresswoman for Bieber breaking news? For Press Party, I'm Erica Mora.
All right, Erica, the serious questions. You researched this story. Did you find out how he got his hair like that?
I unfortunately could not find that information. Maybe it's when he was sitting down and was just pulling out his hair out of frustration. Who knows?
We'll have to ask Andrea Mitchell.
We will have to
ask.
She
might know.
She might know. But I mean, the point of that line in my package was it's this distraction that media often has, and I just don't understand it. Is it the hair? It's a DUI. He's not charged with murder or anything like that. And to break away and to interrupt a congresswoman, There's no excuse.
But the pressure on Andrea Mitchell from the producers, from management, I'm sure she had to do that.
Well, I think the point that I'd like to make is the distinction in the media. So, you know, Richard Sherman gets called a thug, and that gets plastered all over the media. Although he has no record, his GPA is probably twice that of Justin Bieber.
Sure.
And we have Justin Bieber, who was characterized as this misguided youth. Right, and so I think that there is, when it comes to the media, how we look at young people, because these young men are both relatively young. How we characterize them has a lot to do with the way that people perceive them, and I take great issue with the way in which Richard Sherman has been characterized and the mischaracterization of Justin Bieber, who this is the set that was he throwing eggs last week.
Yeah,
$20,000
$20,000 worth of damage from throwing eggs.
Yeah,
and assaulting a limo driver in Toronto.
Yeah, he was just charged with that.
Yeah,
So.
I mean, from a journalistic standpoint, first, Andrea Mitchell is a really fine journalist.
Right.
And she must have been clenching her teeth when some producer said in her ear that we're going to break for this.
She didn't say it with
right.
joy. She
Yes.
said, breaking news.
Right.
That's what.
And I think the decision to break in at that point in time was the wrong decision for MSNBC. And I know they're doing it for ratings. It's the same way that CNN, whenever there's a war, their ratings go up because people go in, for things like that. And it's indicative of our celebrity culture that someone like Justin Bieber would be in there. To the Richards thing, I've also heard Bieber called a thug. So to be frank on that, but to the Richards thing, he's not a thug. I didn't particularly like the fact that he was out there extolling, the trash talk and stuff like that. But by the same token, he's a smart guy. He's a good citizen. He just was over exuberant at that point in time.
But it's also, this I think is, as much as I think that the media placates to all of this stuff, it is also a demand issue. It's not a supply. It's not what the media is supplying. It's a demand issue. It's people click.
Yep.
On Bieber. People unfortunately click on Sherman being called a thug. Stop doing it. Stop cooking on those stories,
I agree with that.
You tell the entire population to stop.
Well, hold on, but also, again, I think there's a journalistic. It's not an ethic, but there should be journalistic choices about what is breaking news. And we had this is a couple months back.
Right.
What is actually breaking news?
When a station decided to never use the terms breaking news, that's when we had this discussion.
Right. And I think there, again, Justin Bieber, who, next week, because as you saw, he was smiling in his mugshot, right, with his hair done.
Yeah.
Right, and the fact that I think he's actually using this and manipulating the media to continue to gain attention, circa, the Kardashian-ness of the country.
Of course. And I think something that we could cover this Justin Bieber scandal, whatever you want to call it, in a serious way by talking about the fact that there are people that are trying to get him deported, but then looking at people who are deported on a daily basis for things much less than this. So that makes it serious. It's gone to the White House. It has to. They got more than 100,000 signatures, so he could very well be deported, and that would be an interesting precedent to look at, saying he's getting the same treatment.
Right.
But to your point, there's always a tension between what we really think it has news value and what we think in terms of what the people need to know and what the people want to know and how to attract an audience, because the media is a business. Even PBS is a business. They have begathons for money all the time, right? So without money, you don't get to have a Boston Herald press party. And so what happens is that tension always is there, and in a lot of ways, particularly in this media age with all the competition, what's winning out is the business decision side as opposed to the news value side.
Yeah, and there's a trending issue, right? So like when you look at, you can instantly see things that are trending on Twitter.
Yeah.
And I think this is also the kind of traditional media's push to stay relevant relative to what's going on in the online space. You see what you're doing? You see what you're doing?
I'm not doing it. It's the people that are clicking that are doing it. Let's talk about that.
Hashtag Justin Bieber.
we click on these Justin Bieber stories because we have to be informed and know what's happening in the media landscape. So it's a lose-lose. I don't know.
Yeah, and I have this conversation with friends of mine all the time who always say, "Oh, why was so-and-so in the news?" I'm like, "Did you click on the story?" And they always say yes. I'm like, "That's why," because everyone is clicking on it. And I watch the Kardashians because it's my breakaway from reality for a little bit, right? We all have that curiosity factor, but it's
your guilty pleasure.
No, but
guilty pleasure, but now I don't know what it is. It's gone overboard. It's gone overboard as far as that.
And the most amazing thing is, unlike Justin Bieber in that space, Kim and those guys, they have no actual. They don't sing.
Right.
They don't dance.
Right.
They don't paint.
Right.
There's
On the topic of the Kardashians. I don't know how that always comes up.
Well, but
we
yeah,
have some weird obsession with them.
We talk about them despite the fact that no one understands why they're
Exactly.
famous.
That's so true.
Maybe they're famous because we talk about them.
All right. Well, that's all the time we have today. Thanks for watching, and make sure you chime in on the comments. For Press Party and Suffolk University, I'm Katie Eastman. We'll see you next week.